Okay, I hope you liked that Bush Gore Lockbox Saturday Night Live video. It's one of the classics. So let's talk about a few things in it. So why did Al Gore? So Al Gore was Bill Clinton's vice president. He's trying to become president after Bill Clinton had termed out. Why does he? So in the actual debate, not the Saturday Night Live version, he did talk a lot about this lockboxes. And as I am sitting there watching the video, I'm thinking, okay, Saturday Night Live is going to make a big deal out of that lockbox. That's exactly what they did. So why did he? What did the lockbox represent, or what was in the lockbox? He was attempting to appeal to senior citizens with their Social Security benefits. There, as you recall from our discussion in voting, seniors vote more often than do other people. Lots of reasons for this. Two of the most pertinent: seniors have more time, particularly if they're retired, to go out and vote, and they understand the importance of protecting their rights. They understand that politicians want to appeal to them because they in fact vote, which gives them power. So politicians are very careful to protect Social Security because of this. So he uses this lockbox to promote the idea that he will be a friend to senior citizens. He'll protect Social Security. He's also got a prescription drug plan, which again will appeal to the elderly. Now you've noticed a couple of things in this satirical video. Al Gore was pushy. He'd hem and he'd haw, he'd huff. Believe it or not, this is exactly what he did in the actual debate. So one of the reasons I like this debate is not only does Saturday Night Live do a good job with it, but it's to a degree, more so than most, representative of what happened in the actual debate. And so this huffing and puffing he did, he actually did that in the actual debate, again, though not to a degree. This made him look less presidential. I think it turned off a lot of voters. Very close election. In fact, Al Gore did win the popular vote, but he did not win the Electoral College. And as we all know, it is the Electoral College that matters. Al Gore also tended to exaggerate things. You saw his friend Etta Munson, unfortunate shark attack, arm amputated, her leg, whatever it was, infected with syphilis and reattached. Her drug bills ran to a staggering $200 million a day, or whatever it was. Bush can't pronounce names, so he avoids that, and Bush did stumble around with names. Bush, even when he has to sum up his one word, he mispronounces and uses strategery instead of strategic. And of course, Al Gore closes off with lockbox. So you can see here the influence of an actual debate. There's another sub-issue, Saturday Night Live's version of that debate. That would be an interesting study as to see how much that affects the outcome of an election, particularly when you take a look at the fact that they're a liberal media outlook. They have a vested interest in making the conservative candidate look bad. That'd be an interesting study by a political scientist to try and determine if there was some bias there, if their characterizations of what happened at the debate was fair, accurate, or if it was equally egregious to both. But very interesting study. Nevertheless, that's what it is. Okay, so you can see how the debates can influence an election. So now we're going to move on to this idea of money in elections. John F. Kennedy's father, Kennedy came to his father once and said, "Hey, I need some more money for my election." And his father responded, I have it there in quotes, "I will buy you the election, but I won't buy you a landslide." His father felt that he was, in a sense, feeding his ego and wanted more money, not to ensure his election, but to get a landslide. What his father was inadvertently acknowledging was that money impacts the outcome of an election. And it does. It is important. It is important for many of reasons. You've got a virtual army of organizers who assist in the campaign. You've got lawyers. You've got accountants. You've got them in every state. You want lawyers and accountants to do things right, to keep you out of jail, particularly with the campaign finance reform laws. Seems like after every election now there is some investigation as to somebody's broken campaign campaign finance reform laws and go to jail for that. It's a dangerous thing these days to run for political office. It costs a lot of money to have the TV spots, the commercials. The travel costs a lot. It's just not you traveling. It's your whole little inner circle of army there that's going on. So it takes a lot of money to run a campaign. So where does that money come from? In presidential elections, it comes from both public, meaning the government funds it, and private sources. In the Congress, it's only private. Congress people have to figure out a way to raise their own money, and there's all sorts of restrictions, which we're not going to get into at the moment, as to how much money they can raise from an individual versus corporation versus political action committee. There's set limits by law. In where the presidency is concerned, there's a formula that takes place for every dollar that is donated to a president under a certain limit. Usually, I think right now it's 250. The public, meaning government money, will match that. If it's over that set limit of 250, the government won't match it, and they'll match it up to a certain amount. So campaign money for the presidency comes from both public and private. For Congress, it's only private. There is a feeling by some that all elections should be from public sources of money. The idea being here, if it only comes from private, it's only the wealthy who can afford to run, because it takes so much money to get your campaign off the ground that a typical American just doesn't have the resources to do that, or doesn't have the political connections to be able to raise that money. And so that's why the idea is there, that there should be public sources, not just for the presidency, but for Congress as well. Of course, then that all costs money, and where do we get that money? That's a whole nother issue. Oh, too far. Let's go back. Okay, here we go. What does campaign money buy? In a presidential election, there's not much difference if both accept public funding. So back to this slide, you don't actually have to accept public funding. You can reject public funding and just hoping that you can raise more money. You still have to stay within campaign finance reform limits, but hoping that you can raise more money and then outspend your opponent. But if they both accept public funding, then there's not much difference in what they have. Congressional makes a big difference. So since congressional is private, the candidate who can raise more money tends to do better. Name recognition is expensive to buy. Usually that comes, particularly in the Senate races, it comes from TV spots that go throughout a state. So that's going to be expensive to buy. Studies have shown that candidates who spend more do better. It does not mean that a person who spends more money than his opponent will win the election. But when you look at those candidates who win, it tends to be the candidates who spend more money than their opponent. There's many other factors that come into play, but that is one of the factors. Another advantage that a congressional candidate would have over a challenging opponent who is not in Congress is members of Congress have the advantage of franked mail. What does that mean? Franked mail means that a member of Congress has the right to send mail to their constituents for free. So what they always do at the time of every election, they send out a little flyer telling their constituents what they're working on right now in Congress, and when they get reelected, what they'll be working on still. Ultimately, it's campaign literature, but that advantage of franked mail is a big deal, particularly in House races, where a typical member of the House represents about 690,000 people. So if you look at 3 people in a household, that's going to be about 350,000 households he's got to send mail to. 50 cents or so for a stamp, 50 cents for the material. There's $1. That's $300,000 you have to come up with just to send one piece of campaign literature to all the members of your district. Whereas a member of Congress can do that for free. Plus, a member of Congress finds it easier to raise money anyway. All right. So we talked about a lot of things, but what decides an election? A lot of people like to argue that the best candidate wins or should win. But then that begs the question, what is the best candidate? So does political party matter? Let's go back to this best candidate. So this idea that who's got better ideas, who's got more experience, what does it mean to be the best candidate? The reality is there is no such thing as the best candidate. Political party, if I'm a Republican, I'm likely going to think that the Republican candidate is the best candidate. I'd never think that the Democratic candidate was the best candidate, because ideologically he or she is just so opposed to what I think. And so what it turns out to be is the best candidate often turns out to be based on which political party they are. Based on that, if that were the case, Democrats should always win almost every election, because there are simply more Democrats than there are Republicans across the nation. So particularly when you look at the president, Democrats should win every election. So then why don't they, since there's more Democrats? There are a number of reasons why. Democrats are less loyal to their party than are Republicans. So in other words, Democrats are more willing to cross party lines and vote for the opposing party than are Republicans. Republicans tend to attract independent voters more than Democrats do. Now, when you have an election like in the Obama election where Obama won, he was better at that than his opponent, Mitt Romney. So whoever can attract the independent voters tends to win. But usually, Republicans are better at doing that than are Democrats. And Republicans are just more likely to vote than are Democrats. So these are three reasons why political party doesn't matter as much as you think it would, and it doesn't matter on the terms of the Democrat side, because if that were the case, Democrats would always win. All right. There are some other issues that impact the election. The economy. The economy is a big deal. It'll be interesting to see how it impacts the election, with Trump here giving that some experts believe we're going to go into a Great Depression. The economic factors. If the economy is doing poorly, the incumbent loses. If it is doing well, he wins. That tends to be what happens. There's this idea of prospective voting or forward-looking voting. The problem with forward-looking voting is it takes a lot of information that many of us don't have. So most of us vote retrospectively. We look backwards and say, how has the candidate done? Or have they done a good job? And if they've done a good job, we tend to vote for them. Particularly if the economy is doing well, we tend to vote for them. If it isn't, we tend to vote against them. There are a myriad of number of other issues that come into play. Crisis. Scandal, you name it. In this election, coronavirus is going to come into play. So just lots of things make a difference. And the campaign itself makes a difference. Can the candidate go out there and rally his base, get them to support him, get them to donate money, and help him? If he can't do that, it's likely that he's not going to win. Some leftovers relative to this, and then we'll be done with this unit. Realignments are a sharp and lasting shift in the popular support for a party. So most elections don't produce realignments. Sharp and lasting. So initially, African Americans supported the Republican Party. After all, it was the Republican Party who freed them. But then when the Great Depression came, the Republican Party was perceived as doing nothing for poorer people and African Americans, whereas the Democrats were willing to do all these things. So African Americans jumped ship from the Republican Party, joined the Democratic Party, and have stayed there ever since. That is a sharp and lasting shift in popular support for a party. Mandates are the idea that the president has the right to enact policies he has advocated for during the election. Most elections do not produce a mandate, although candidates are quick to claim that they have a mandate to enact their policies because they won the election. But we may have voted for a candidate for lots of other reasons than the things that he was campaigning on, such as he was not the other guy, he was not the opponent, who we liked even less. Split ticket voting. Split ticket voting is when you vote for a candidate of a president for one particular party, and a member of Congress from the other party. This is why we can get divided government, and we'll talk more about divided government at the end in the presidency. And that's it for this video.